And good afternoon to our esteemed panelists, dedicated colleagues, and all our valued participants joining us today. My name is Ziad Alexandre Hayek, and I'm honored to serve as the president of the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals. It is a pleasure to welcome you to our 12th session in the series on small-scale public-private partnerships, though I think it's the 13th probably session. As we continue our bi-weekly meetings in 2024, our commitment to leveraging small-scale PPPs to promote the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals remains unwavering. Our journey began with a comprehensive exploration of the basics of small-scale PPPs. We defined what we mean by small-scale PPPs, and then in the sessions that followed, we have addressed a range of challenges faced by these initiatives. We have explored potential solutions and evaluated the effectiveness of various strategies through detailed analysis and shared experiences. Our last session focused on the healthcare sector with these partnerships. Today, we turn our attention to small-scale PPPs in the education sector. Through constructive dialogue and sharing of real-world experiences, we aim to provide actionable insights that can enhance the effectiveness and sustainability of educational PPPs. We will explore how these partnerships can improve educational infrastructure, integrate new technologies, and enhance learning outcomes. Thank you for your continued participation as we explore these vital topics together. I look forward to an engaging and insightful discussion today. I'm delighted to introduce the moderator of this session, Mr. Nasser Masoud. Nasser is the chair of WAPP's Social Sector PPPs chapter, and also the founder and managing director of the advisory practice called Concept Realization. He has 30 years of experience in PPPs, which covers all aspects, including strategy, structuring, financing, implementation, and monitoring. Nasser was impaneled by the ADB's Office of PPPs as a health PPP specialist. He was conferred as a global healthcare key opinion leader by the Korean Ministry of Health. He's a member of the UNECE team of experts, which drafted the global standard for healthcare PPPs, and is currently, I should say, healthcare, but also, of course, Nasser's experience involves all social sector PPPs. He's currently on the team which is drafting the policy guidelines for digitization in the social sector PPPs. He's also a member of HBS Athar Crosswords team, undertaking a program with Dubai Future Foundation on accelerating the adoption of digital health in GCC countries. Nasser is a board member of PIIF Investment in a Medical School and University Hospital in Jordan. He's also a board member of a private healthcare company based in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and is a senior advisor to private equity firm TVM Healthcare Capital. Nasser will guide today's conversation towards understanding the importance of small-scale PPPs in the education sector. Nasser, it's a privilege to have you with us and our esteemed panelists. I turn it over to you to introduce the panelists and moderate the session.
Thank you so much, Ziad. It's an honor and a delight to be on this panel and moderating it. And thank you in advance to our esteemed panelists for joining. Just really to set this kind of in context. So when we talk about the education sector, we talk more broadly about schools, kindergartens, universities, colleges, and also quite importantly, the what's called the TVET, so the vocational training sector. So it is actually quite all-encompassing. When we get into our discussion, because the focus is on small-scale PPPs, we're not going to be covering universities, for example, because they are, of course, large projects, like large infrastructure projects, which may or may not have services associated with them. Just really wanted to set that in context. If you hear us talk a lot about schools and kindergartens, it's not that we're ignoring everything else, because the focus is really more on the smaller aspects. What we want to do really is look at how the whole landscape of PPPs in the education sector is working, And in particular, we want to discuss this prevailing trend of aggregating a lot of small units, be it schools or kindergartens, aggregating those into larger projects. And that tends to be the case if we look at, for example, in Saudi, they had a project of 60 schools, in Oman, 42 schools, and so on. And we've seen this trend both in developed countries and in some recent countries, where the aggregation of these is primarily designed to make it attractive for developers and for project financiers to actually come into the project. Otherwise, if you can imagine individual schools or individual kindergartens costing, say, $2, $3, $4 million each one on its own does not constitute a large enough and attractive enough opportunity to be considered for project financing and for development. But that, of course, brings its own other challenges, and they're the types of things that we plan to be discussing in today's session. So without further ado, I want to start by introducing our panelists. Our first is Ms. Sumaya Azzam from Jordan. She heads the PPP department at the Ministry of Education in Jordan, where she's responsible for managing feasibility studies, development, procurement processes for PPP projects at the ministry. Also, importantly, and we'll be talking more about this, selecting sites, resolving all pending site issues, coordinating with concerned authorities, and so on. And finally, of course, in preparing all of the documentation that's needed to take projects forward. We have from Brazil, I hope I'll pronounce this right, Thiago Grego. Thiago is Vice President of the IPGC. He'll tell us what IPGC stands for shortly. He specializes in public concessions and public-private partnerships. Thiago is an executive with experience in innovation, strategy, negotiation with city council, legislative assembly and trade unions, and also in drafting bills and implementing public policies. He holds an MBA from IESE University of Navarra, a master's in strategic management from Dom Cabral Foundation, also a postgraduate degree in treasury management and a bachelor's degree in public administration from João Pinheiro Foundation School of Government. We have also from Brazil, but from Recife, Mr. Alexandre Pessat, who's public manager in the infrastructure sector in the concessions and public-private partnerships. He holds a postgraduate degree in project management and graduate in law from University of São Paulo. He's currently acting as Secretary of Concessions and PPPs for the city of Recife in Brazil. And last but not least, from Pakistan, we have Mr. Salman Ahmad. He's a PPP professional with over 9 years of experience in managing PPPs across infrastructure and social sector projects. His academic qualifications include ACCA, which I believe is the Chartered Accountancy, and also a master's degree in economics from the University of Karachi. He currently serves as the Director of Finance at the PPP node within the School, Education and Literacy Department of the Sindh province in Pakistan. Salman has worked on a few mega projects in the Sindh province in both infrastructure and social sectors. And I came across the activities of the Sindh province in the voucher system some years back, and we'd be, of course, very interested in hearing about that when we get to that later on in the panel. So having introduced you, I'd like to turn back to you individually and perhaps in the same sequence, if you'd like to give a bit more of a background on yourselves, but importantly, elaborate on your experience and the experience of your organization in the education sector. So we'll start with Thiago.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited for the seminar. I want to thank Nasser for the opportunity and the invitation. My name is Thiago Grego. I'm the Vice President of the Institute of Planning and Management of Cities. It's what IPGC called. We are an NGO specialized in bringing solutions for cities. I've been working with PPPs for the last 20 years in Brazil. We pioneered the first PPP in Brazil. It was in Minas Gerais, a road project in the center west of the state, followed by the first PPP for prisons in Brazil. In the education sector, I served as a planning secretary during the development of the education PPP at Belo Horizonte City Hall. It was the first PPP for education in Brazil. It was a groundbreaking initiative here. As a consultant, I've been involved in projects in Paraná, Mato Grosso, and Minas Gerais, assisting the initial modeling of the PPPs, education PPPs in these states.
Thank you. Sumaya?
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today, and I would like to thank Nasser for the invitation. My role at the Ministry of Education in general, as Nasser mentioned, in managing visibility studies, development and procurement process for PPP projects, selecting the project site, resolving site issues, and coordinating with the concerned authorities to achieve project objective. In addition to that, preparing the project concept note and registering projects in National Registry of Investment Project, reviewing the due diligence reports, the transaction structure reports. In Jordan, which is one of the LMICs facing major challenges represented by the growing population, the deteriorating infrastructure, and overcrowded classrooms, in addition to the presence of rented and double-shifted schools. All of these reasons are putting excessive pressure on the existing infrastructure. The Ministry of Education is seriously working on establishing schools under PPP models. The Ministry of Education had previous experience with PPP, represented by tendering PPP schools as pilot project, using the model of design, build, finance, operate, maintenance, transfer. The project was supposed to provide educational services to approximately 14,000 students, including 360 classrooms and 44 KG rooms. Unfortunately, due to the high financial offer that submitted, the decision was made to cancel the tender. We are currently at the Ministry of Education working on a new PPP project of build and maintain 25 schools, and the project now in the selecting the site procedure.
Thank
you, Nasser.
Thank you, Sumaya. Let's move to Alexandre, please.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks for the invite to talk about our projects here in Recife. Just quickly presenting myself. My name is Alexandre. I've been working in the infrastructure sector for the last 6 years, and I've worked for about 3 years in the City Hall of São Paulo, mainly with small-scale PPPs. I'm now in my experience in the City Hall of São Paulo. I've worked in the development of the projects and also all the monitoring in the contracts already assigned. About 11 contracts already signed. After that, I came here to Recife. If you guys don't know where is Recife, it's the capital city of the state of Pernambuco in the northwest of Brazil. We have a program here for PPPs in the City Hall. I'm now currently the Secretary of Concessions and PPPs for the City Hall of Recife. We have some small-scale PPPs being development. One of them, it's our education PPP. It's a daycare project, so it involves about the construction and maintenance of 40 schools. They will attend about 9,000 children and impact over 27,000 people, holding about 800 teachers. So it's a project that involves $100 million of OPEX and $87 million of CAPEX, and do not include educational services. It's only it's a project that's only about the infrastructure, construction, and the management. And we have other small-scale PPPs here, including healthcare and social housing. I think I'll be talking about the social housing in another moment. So I'll be glad to contribute here. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks. And last but not least, Salman.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Nasser, for giving me the opportunity. I'm basically working with a public-private partnership node of School Education Department in Sindh, Pakistan. And I have experience of around 9 years in working on PPPs. Before that, I was working on infrastructure PPPs, and I have experience of working with both from the private side as well as from the government side. So currently, we are working on education projects. I'm here since last 3 years in this department, and we basically work on PPPs related to education sector. And our first project, the flagship project named the Education Management Organization, EMO project, it was launched the first contract was signed in 2016. And the background of that project was there were some floods in 2011 in Sindh, and a lot of schools were damaged due to these catastrophic floods. So USAID came up with the program to reconstruct a network of schools. So 106 schools were being under the construction with the support of USAID. So along with that construction support, there were some other components related to the capacity building of the government and policy making and certain other initiatives. So based on that, through different consultative sessions, a policy was notified named the Sindh Education Management Organization policy, which was notified in 2015. So according to that policy, you can engage private sector organizations to manage and improve the functioning of public schools, and to address the management gaps, and maintaining and upgrading the infrastructure, and to work in close coordination with the government authorities. So that project was the first contract under that project was signed in 2016. And initially it was a single school model when one school was handed over to organization who wins the project. But and it was launched in 7 different procurements. The last procurement cycle is completed in January this year. So initially it was the single school model. One school was handed over to a private sector organization, but from the 4th round of procurement, so just due to because it was very difficult to manage the contracts if you are signing 106 concession agreements with different parties. So it was decided at that time to club those schools and just make them a package and just hand over a whole package to one single organization. So from this 4th round of procurement, this package system was introduced, and along with that, some other government schools in the nearby area were packaged so that these schools can be uplifted in the similar manner as the reconstructed schools were being. So this project is handing over of all the projects is completed, and all the school are functional now. And there we have some achievements in this project, which we can discuss later during our discussion. A similar nature of project we are going to execute, and we have recently launched that project, is the JICA upgraded schools. So JICA just upgraded certain schools in our province. And so those schools, the first phase of that project we have recently launched, and we are expecting to receive the bids of that project shortly. And apart from that, in the area of teachers training, we have launched a project for the teachers training institutes. Basically, there are certain teachers training institutes which offer 4 years B.Ed program, a bachelor's in education and master's in education programs, along with the trainings or in-service trainings of existing government teachers. So this was the first project which was executed on the basis of unsolicited proposal. So we received an unsolicited proposal in 2017, and after all the legal requirement, we executed that project. And this project is currently in the operational phase. And the organization who has taken over has totally transformed that institute, and they have made some reforms in the curriculum development and infrastructure rehabilitation and in some other areas. So along with that, we're also working a non-formal education project to address the issue of out-of-school children, but that project is in the feasibility stage. So yeah, that's from my side. Over to you.
A lot of projects. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we kind of turn to the individual questions, again, the problem that we're trying to solve here is a fairly simple one. It's really giving the right to every child to have an education, to have access to schooling. So it's really about creating access on the one hand, so that every child can actually reach a school and get educated, but at the same time to actually ensure that there's a quality of education as well. So it's not just about access, it's also about quality. And yes, access, unfortunately, in some countries is only being provided by either children having to go very long distances to reach their schools because there aren't schools within an acceptable travel distance, or they're having to overcrowd the classrooms. It's not unheard of in many countries, and Sumaya, you were sharing some experiences there that instead of having 25 kids per school, it can be perhaps 35 or 40 or even more. And I've experienced that in countries in Central Asia where the numbers have even gone up to 50 per classroom, and also double shifting. And I've also seen triple shifting in a day, which is also not conducive to kind of good education. And an interesting thing I was talking to Mus'ab from the Tatweer Building Company in Saudi, who have recently completed the first wave of their PPP schools. And he was telling me about some of the soft KPIs that have been met, which is the reduction in truancy. So children are actually more motivated to go to school because the environment is more conducive. So again, here we talk about creating access, creating a more conducive environment to learning. And one of the things, of course, is that there is technology, because we can't ignore that technology pervades everything that we do, and that we need to offer children the opportunity to learn technologies, and schools that just aren't equipped for that aren't fulfilling the purpose. So here I want to really turn to this issue of, how do you see the role? And I'm going to start with Sumaya on this. How do you see the role of small-scale PPPs in enhancing the educational infrastructure and integrating new technologies, and obviously, consequently, improving learning outcomes?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Nasser, I think by implementing small-scale PPPs could help countries to meet challenges. Small-scale PPPs allow for pilot programs and incremental scaling. Successful initiatives can be expanded and replicated, ensuring that effective solutions reach a large number of students over time. Where the successful implementation in LMICs requires careful consideration of scale, financial viability, risk allocation, and adaptation of models. Addressing these challenges could unlock the potential PPPs to contribute in improving educational infrastructure and outcomes in LMICs. Thank you.
I think that's a very interesting perspective, and maybe Salman can comment on this. Actually, using these to pilot, because sometimes actually trying to make a project big by combining 20 or 30 or 40 schools together just means you need a long time till you secure land plots and get them ready and so on until you position it. What would your perspective be on that, Salman?
Yeah, I think you can launch that project in different phases, because we have launched these we didn't launch these 106 schools at a time. We launched it based on the construction status and when the project is ready. So in different phases, these sort of projects could be launched. Because it would be very difficult for you to manage the projects if you launch this project, especially in the case of low and middle income countries where the government setup and government structures are not very efficient.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's useful. Things we will come back to explore is by doing them 6 at a time. Who would be your developer and how can you motivate project financing for that? I know that this is one of the issues that was also faced in Brazil. So I'm going to turn to Alexandre on that, but also to elaborate on how small-scale PPPs can enhance the educational infrastructure and improve learning outcomes. Unmute.
Okay, I was trying to find that. So we have like some challenges here on implementing this kind of project in small scale PPPs in general. I think when we talk about the cost escalations of those projects, we have, in my view, in my opinion, we have three main challenges to tackle. The first one is the social infrastructure is a new frontier in Brazil. We have like the economics PPPs, economical infrastructure that's traditionally made by concessions here, like roads and railroads and airports, etc. And we have like a system that is already used to invest and operate this kind of infrastructure. And we have a challenge, a practical challenge in convincing those traditional investors and operators and developers of PPPs and concessions to change their view, to approve some thesis in the investment groups to start our projects in the educational sector, for instance, and not just that, but to convince them to actually develop some projects that is going to be financially attractive to them, that are used to those large values, large costs of traditional infrastructure projects, and to those small scale PPPs. And specifically, I have an experience in the northwest of Brazil. We have like a regional challenge. Traditionally, we have the PPPs and concessions concentrated in the southwest of Brazil, like São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Minas Gerais, where Thiago acts now. So we have just this additional, here in Recife, we have this additional challenge to bring those operators and investors to the region of Brazil. Yeah, and actually, it's the region that we have one of the lowest GDPs in the country, and it's here that we most need some of the benefits of those PPPs in the educational sector.
Very insightful, thank you. I want to turn to a slightly different question than to Thiago, which is, let's talk about challenges, because we kind of see now how we can use small-scale PPPs, but what are the challenges that you faced yourself when it came to structuring and implementing PPPs in education? And then, you know, were these challenges capable of being solved by going down the small scale in a similar way to what Salman and Alexandre were talking about?
Okay, when you're talking about small-scale PPPs, I think the first thing that we are saying here in Brazil is about the problems of infrastructure and the effects of this in teaching quality. So just to give some numbers, we know that 75% of the cities here face problems in basic education. most because of lack of toilets, drinking water, and lack of sewage. And that's what Alexander was telling about the northeast of Brazil. That's one of the big problems. And because of that, we have some problems with regulatory and bureaucratic hurdles in this case. And why we have this? Because when we are navigating regulatory framework, they can be complex and time consuming. And most of the problems is because of obtaining necessary approvals and alignment with the public education standards and the requirement of this and the negotiations. What have we done in Belo Horizonte to solve this, to give a solution for this? We built a new kind of school, a school facility. We created a joint force with the Ministry of Education and the private sector and the engineering department. We have to remember the case in Belo Horizonte. We are talking about 10 years ago when was the first PPP that we have done this. So 10 years ago, it was very new to discuss this kind of thing. So we put this in a joint force and we discussed the standards that would be incorporated in the ministry guidelines, reducing the approval time. So that's one point that I think it's a nice way to solve this kind of problem that we use it to solve this problem here in Brazil. The second problem and the challenge that we had was the stakeholder alignment. Align the interests of diverse stakeholders, including governing bodies, private companies, teachers, and parents can be challenging. And we conducted comprehensive stakeholder engagement sessions with them to identify common goals and address these concerns. In Belo Horizonte, we have 46,000 public servants, and among them, we have 12,000 teachers. So they were very resistant with the project of the PPP project. They were thinking about privatization. That's the main problem. So to solve this, we explained to them in small groups, in session groups of them, that was a way for them to concentrate in the pedagogical issues, while the PPP and the contractor would concentrate in the facilities. And comparing these two kind of schools here, most of the principals that take care of the schools, they spend more than 56% of their time with facilities issues. And nowadays, when we try to, and we bring the data from the school, the PPP schools, the principals have 70% of their time in pedagogical issues. So it's a great thing that we have done, and now they can see the benefits. So at that time, we did this focus group to solve the challenges. And now, after 10 years, they see the results, and the pedagogical issues now is much more discussed with them, and they see the results.
I think that's a very interesting example that you've given there, Thiago, because we see quite often in social sector projects that there is resistance from staff, public sector staff, to that kind of outsourcing. I think it's more because they just don't know what's around the corner. Maybe they develop some job insecurity around it, and so on. So the example you quoted, I think, is very encouraging. I want to move on from that to this concept of the aggregation of small PPPs. And the issue there is, of course, by aggregating them, not only do you make them more attractive to large developers who can then take on the full PPP risk and give them to an EPC contractor who can interface their risk, the risk they take with the risk that is transferred to the developer, and motivates project financing, because if you're into a ticket size of 300+ million, for example, in US dollars, of course the banks are highly interested in financing it, as opposed to trying to finance $5 or $10 million from the banks. So one of the issues that comes there is the issue of land acquisition. And I think, Sumaya, you have some experiences to share on that one. So if I can turn to you on that one, please.
Yes, thank you, Nasser. Actually, we faced several difficulties in land acquisition. During the due diligence period, some sites had to be replaced due to ownership issues, and few steep slope sites were challenging from technical perspective. Other challenges related to commercial considerations, like not to there is no tax exemptions was granted to own building materials and equipment, which led to rising the financial offer submitted. I think as a lessons learned from our sorry, Nasser, I would like to add something. Resolving the land acquisition issues requires a long period of time in Jordan, often exceeding a year. Some of the issues that we have faced are first thing, difficulty of finding a proper site in high density areas. Most of the selected sites requires obtaining land ownership, either allocation or acquisition. There is a difference in Jordan between allocation and acquisition of land, and all of this process requires a long time. And in some cases, there is a possibility of not obtaining the final approval for land ownership from the related entities, or due to not agree on the price of the land type to be purchased. Resolving the site issues and getting the required documentation is another challenge. In some cases, we had faced to canceling a number of sites due to technical site issues, either site topography, difficulties of accessing road, or utilities network. As a lessons learned from our experience, I see the site characteristics and the environmental and social considerations are key to site selection. Flat site topography with access to road, utilities network is essential. Other considerations, sites to be away from industrial or highways. Thank you, Nasser.
Thanks. There was a question, it's up to you if you want to answer it. There was a question posted in the chat, in the Q&A chat, from somebody anonymous, which says, we understand there was a Jordan School PPP tender with support from IFC, which happened last year. That only FO, I don't know what that means, that only one bid was submitted. Any update if the project will be retendered again? Up to you if you wish to answer it, of course.
Not to answer this question.
Okay, no problem. We'll move on. I want to move on to financing. Financing can be a major hurdle for small-scale PPPs. As we said, the ticket size is not that great. Now, I wonder, Salman, if you can elaborate on the challenges that relate to financing such projects, and also share any strategies that you've come across that enabled you to encounter them.
Yes, I do agree. Financing could be a big hurdle, especially in case of LMICs. For that, the government, while developing the project, should keep a forecast projections if they would be able to fund the project. Also, contingent liabilities should also be calculated, and a well-structured risk matrices to be developed along with the mitigating strategies. Further, other sources of funding may also be considered, like a commitment from multilateral institutions or commercial lending. And the social impact bonds could also be an option to achieve any specific objectives, like if you want to promote girls' education or early childhood initiatives. For all this, it's very important to have a specialized unit within your either in the finance department or a separate entity to efficiently manage the possible funding issues. Like in our case, we have a separate company named PSF, Public-Private Partnership Support Facility. The company has members from the government as well as private boards, and they manage the Viability Gap Fund, which is used for the PPP projects funding. So they perform their own independent assessments, risk assessments, and credit enhancements is also a part of their role. So in our case, our PPP projects are usually funded through the viability gap fund. And in case of the feasibility studies, so there's a separate funding named the project development fund. So these funds are apart from the regular annual budgets or the departmental budgets, and they are being maintained through this specialized company. And their role is to keep forecast of how much finances would be required. And since our higher education is free of cost, we cannot charge fees as per our local laws. So almost all the projects in education sector are government based. So government should have the finances, and they should have a good forecast and the projections so that there won't be any funding issues.
That's very useful information, and I think these funds and these everything that's geared towards the viability gap funding can be very supportive. And we're seeing, for example, now the development funding institutions, so World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and so on, actually stepping in to deal with that kind of an issue. So rather than provide money as a grant to somewhere, that for self-construct, they're looking more and more to use this kind of funding to dovetail with a PPP program, where if the availability payments are too high and there isn't the fiscal capacity within the government to deal with those, that they actually come in and provide either soft loans or grant money that will enable the government to actually meet its financial obligations. And I think this is where you can actually get a significant improvement in infrastructure that can provide a more enhanced environment for education. I want to move to Alexander and talk about construction costs, because obviously construction cost escalation is a key with this. And we know on the one hand, the management of construction costs by governments, if they're doing these projects directly, kind of rests with trying to get the contract up and running as soon as possible and moving towards what we call the fixed price contract, so that there's no inflation to be paid once the contract has been signed. But I want to ask how construction cost escalation can actually impact the involvement of large developers and contractors in small-scale PPPs, and to what extent you've adopted approaches that enable the management of these types of costs.
Okay, it's related what I was talking at first in the last question, but we have, as I was talking, this problem, the scale of the costs, because we have to attract those traditional investors and operators to this new sector that's being built by the government here in Brazil. And actually, we have some issues in the costs when we are talking about we're discussing the project internally in the government, and also in the Court of Accounts that we respond to, because one point that's always aspect of criticism is the value of those buildings that are sometimes higher than the traditional public buildings that are normally paid for the administration. And that's because when we are developing those PPP projects, we consider that all the technical regulatory framework is being considered in the project. So and sometimes the public management that doesn't correspond to those regulations when building normal infrastructure for schools. And also because we expect from our PPP partner that he constructs those buildings in a very short time. So actually, it's not just about the cost of the infrastructure, but in how fast you can deliver that to the population, and how the faster you demand those buildings to be delivered, the cost will be higher, because we have to implement some more modern and highly costed engineering technicals. So we have some criticism in here internally in the City Hall and in the Court of Accounts about those costs.
Okay. So Maya, I wonder if you can give a perspective on that as well, because you mentioned earlier that the project came to an end in its procurement because of the contractors' prices, and whether that was more driven by financial markets in terms of the impact on availability payment or action cost per square meter or per school unit. If you're able to give a perspective on that, it'd be quite useful.
Sorry, Nasser, I think the internet just... can you repeat that?
Yes, of course. I was turning to Sumaya on the same question, and I was referring to something that Sumaya said earlier, which is that the project in Jordan that was under procurement was stopped because of the cost issues. And if you could give a perspective on this, whether this was, I mean, if you were able to identify whether this was due to construction cost per se, so the unit of a school or the square meter cost was significantly higher than you expected, or if it was other factors such as risk allocation issues, such as cost of debt and that type of thing, cost of capital, that came into deriving the availability payment.
Yes, Nasser. I think several things that affected on the cost of PPP schools in Jordan. One of these things is the site topography. Some of the sites topography were steep deep. That affect on the high estimating of the construction cost. Another thing is, I think some of the commercial considerations. There is no tax exemptions. There no tax exemption was granted on building materials and equipment, which led to rising the financial offer submitted. In general, I think the government entities should look at PPP projects from different perspectives, and therefore making a high-level decision in this regard. I think that to overcome these obligations, the tax exemptions and grant funding could sustainability reduce government's financial obligations.
Yeah. Okay. These are useful pointers. I think for anyone structuring projects, that they really look at what the government can also do to enable lowering of the construction costs for the benefit. Any perspective on that? I mean, I think this is quite an important point, because this can really make or break a project. Salman and Thiago, start with Salman.
Yeah, I agree with Sumaya. Basically, these sort of flexibilities or these sort of events should be specified in the contract, so that to avoid these sort of issues. And as she mentioned about the tax issues, that they were not given tax exemptions. So I think there's a provision of change in law concept in our PPP contracts. If there is some sort of changes in law or taxes, so that risk is lies with the government. So these sort of clauses should be specified in the concession agreement, so that these uncertain, unforeseen events would be tackled. Yeah.
Great. Thiago, if you can also give your perspective on that, but also put it in the context of the affordability of annual payments, because obviously the construction cost has a direct impact on the annual payments. Because obviously, if the annual affordable and they're outside the fiscal capacity of the government or the ministry, then there's no sustainable PPP project as a result. Talking about the construction cost and ensuring the affordability of the payment streams.
Okay. One of the points that I think it's very important is, and this is one big issue when we're talking about size of schools, because if you want to have affordability in this kind of project, we need to have a certain size for the school. We're talking about 500 to 1,000 students, so it can be viable. So it's hard to have a small school less than 100 students to be viable. So according to this, as I said on the question before, in Belo Horizonte, we discussed this with the Ministry of Education. And one of the things that they have in the ministry, they make a financial contribution for municipalities for each school that you construct. They pay this with the education quota salary. It's a contribution that the companies here in Brazil does for the basic education in Brazil, to improve the basic education in Brazil. But we can just use them for construction and for infrastructure. In this case, they have three kinds of schools for 500, 1,000 and 1,500 students. So it's size for the schools. And we discussed with them for this kind of construction with the private sector that should meet these requirements. When we did this, we had an estimate of 40 schools that were in the initial contract, but we discussed to pay this as long as the contract, monthly. So we would pay the construction monthly, so it would be on the budget that we had. When we approved this with the ministry, after the delivery of the school, they had to come to the city and to assure that the school was in the requirement. And if it was, they would pay in advance for the whole price of the school. So this should reduce the costs of the monthly payments. In this case, we did this before, so we sat with them, we discussed the kind of requirements, and if it was in the structure, we could reduce the price and the length of the contract. In this case, we could deliver more schools because we had more budget for doing more than we had thought before, and after that, we delivered the schools with more in less time. That was because the kind of construction here we approved with them the light steel frame kind of construction, so it was easier to deliver and to reduce the costs. That's one of the things that we have done when we are discussing the project. I think Alexander has a question.
Yeah, please, Alexander, go ahead.
Actually, it's a comment. We here in Recife were inspired by this project that Thiago is talking about. He said this project happened, initiated 10 years ago, and until now it was the only education PPP actually happening in Brazil. And I think something he was telling us, it's really important. Here in Brazil, we have a federative government. We have the federal government, we have the states, and we have the city halls that divide the competences by the constitution and divide all the budget that's provided by the taxes. So it's in the last years that that we're initiating talking about PPPs in the social sector and the educational sector. Those involve a large amount of investments, and those investments are made by sub-national governments, the states and the municipal governments, the city halls. So without the support, the technical support and the financial support of the federal government, I think here in Brazil we won't be able to tackle this issue. We won't be able to actually implement those PPPs in education. I think this is the scenario that we speak here with other secretaries in the states and the other city halls. It's something that we're living here in Recife to search the support of federal government. But what was Thiago saying now, that 10 years ago we had this support, and this involves a political alignment and a political view of the federal government that holds again the prerogative of implementing educational objectives here in Brazil. That's just a comment. Thanks.
No, that's thank you for that interjection. And it's great to hear that another state was inspired by the same, and to hear about the types of support that at a federal level can actually enable these programs to move forward. And I think that's some very useful messages coming out of this for the wider audience. Okay, I want to move the discussion on to the inclusion of pedagogical services. So this is having, as part of the private partner's role, to deliver the teaching, deliver the curriculum itself, and provide the teachers and the teaching assistants and so on, and of course the administrative staff to the hospital, as opposed to being limited to providing the infrastructure, the maintenance, and some non-core activities like security and so on. Now, this Thiago already mentioned that they've embarked on a program like this, and he talked about the resistance and so on. Something that I often wonder about, because I'm actually quite a person who's very much in favor of outsourcing services, that if the problem we're trying to solve goes beyond infrastructure only, that the problem is about quality of education, then why not consider having governments outsource that, set the standards that need to be met, and then actually be the regulator of this and the quality controller, as opposed to trying to be that. We've seen it across the board in social sector type services, in municipal services, for example, where the quality of service just went up drastically. I mean, if we go back, to the 1980s, Britain with Margaret Thatcher, with all of the outsourcing of government services, we saw drastic improvements in that as well. So, I mean, that was, of course, more privatization than PPP, but the similarity is there, that if you allow the private sector to deliver, set the standards, monitor against those standards, then the chances of achieving a good outcome become much higher. So I just want really to throw that out there and hear your experiences in that. I want to start with Sumaya, because I remember when we were talking earlier that you had this kind of experience in the sector, not necessarily in schools, but in kindergartens, I believe. Sumaya.
Yes. Thank you, Nasser. Yes, the Ministry of Education, preschool in Jordan is mandatory, but at the same time, the Ministry of Education faces challenging of not being able to provide the required KG rooms in public schools. Therefore, the idea of educational vouchers model came up. which will be applied in Jordan as a pilot phase for low-income KG students, where some of the private schools facing difficulty in attracting students due to the high fees comparing to family income. Therefore, the Ministry of Education will enter as a partner with the private sector by providing educational vouchers for KG students, provided that monitoring the performance of the private sector and providing education to students. Thus, the government has solved the problem of KG students by giving them the opportunity to get education in private sector or private schools, and private schools have solved their problem in these areas by covering the full capacity in KG rooms. Thank you, Nasser.
That's a great example. Thank you, Sumaya. And I understand there's a program to roll that kind of thing out now into KG2 and so on in Jordan. So good luck with that. Salman, I came across, as I mentioned at the beginning, a similar program in the Sindh province with the school voucher systems. Perhaps you can tell us about that, and of course any other experiences that you've had in the same area.
Yeah, so here in Pakistan, there are different sort of PPP models are in process. Basically, as we mentioned, the EMO project, that's a sort of different model, but there are education foundations in different provinces. Like in Sindh, we have a Sindh Education Foundation. In Punjab, we have Punjab Education Foundation. So they have different models, like the voucher system, as Sumaya just mentioned. So a similar sort of model we have in Punjab, in which basically the students are being provided with vouchers, and there are certain list of schools, private schools, where they can study free of cost for those students who are having those vouchers. So in that case, the government is just, if you have the infrastructure issues, so in that manner, the government is just resolving this issue of the infrastructure in the short term. And the similar, not the similar, but another model is in process in Sindh, and it's the per child subsidy model. And in that model, basically, we have an organization named SEF. So it's a foundation within the Sindh Education Department. So they basically have two streams in that project. One is they take over they ask private parties to take over the abandoned government buildings, which are not in a working conditions. So they, to some extent, they rehabilitate those buildings and improve the teaching and learning in those schools. And apart from that, there is another program which is through which they uplift the low-cost private schools, because there in Pakistan, since we have insufficient number of public schools, so a number of students have to study in the private schools. So there are many low-cost private schools because everyone cannot afford the fees of elite private schools. So, but those low-cost private schools lacks the quality, because obviously they charge very low fees. So so they cannot provide you quality, because quality has its cost. So so basically they just provide the partial subsidy to those private schools, so that and not, they just don't only provide the funding, but they keep a quality control on that. They give different trainings, and they have in-house training team, and they engage different private consulting firms as well to provide trainings and regular monitoring and evaluation. They submit their annual reports, and their payment is also linked with their annual performances. So these sort of models are also working in different parts of Pakistan, and they are successful because they are running since many years. So that's one of the example that they are successful.
That's amazing. I mean, that really encapsulates a lot what you just described. So we're talking in a way on payment by results, so there's incentivizations to improve. One thing I wasn't clear about, who does the in-house training? Is that provided by the Sindh Education Foundation, or it's an obligation like to get some training from outside parties?
Yeah, they have in-house team, and as well since the number of schools is quite large, so they also engage private firms to do trainings on behalf of Sindh Education Foundation. So they have in-house team as well as they engage private firms as well. Yeah. But they don't outsource this training to the private organization who is running the schools. they are primarily, responsible for the overall operations and management. But the training, just to keep the training as per their standards, so they kept that role in their own.
Yeah. So in a way, I mean, I usually say this about healthcare facilities, where if we tend to focus on capital costs, we tend to focus on construction costs and all of the upfront costs. In reality, when you look at the profit and loss, the income statement of a hospital or a school or a clinic, the amortization profile of the capital cost relative to the operating costs is actually quite trivial, but also not trivial. Maybe 10–15% of your annual cost is the amortization of the building. So the primary thing you're buying actually is the service. Take it to a concession like a road project. A road project is primarily the amortization of the initial costs. Yes, there's maintenance but that's just the top up. And the cost of collecting tolls and so on that is a fraction, an absolute fraction. So really with the social sector, it is the other way around. And this is why I'm a strong advocate of wholesale outsourcing, because if you can think of a voucher model where there's an upfront commitment of having vouchers in a district and saying, provided you meet these quality standards, you will be on the list where these vouchers can actually be used. That will bring the private sector standard up. In a way, it is a public-private partnership, because whether you say I'm committing to you for 25 years or not, there's always going to be students and they always will need education. And if the government is finding that the private sector is automatically stepping in to fill the gap that the public sector has not met or is finding it difficult to meet, then you can provide access and equitable access in that sense, and at the same time provide quality education that you're monitoring. So it kind of moves more towards the small scale as a solution than necessarily the large infrastructure projects. But I want to give Alexandra and Thiago also the opportunity to comment on this. Perhaps Thiago, go first.
Okay, now, so I think one of the things that are very important when we are discussing the quality of education, that the contract has a clear performance-based standards. So if you design the contract as with good standards and good quality controls measurements, I think we could compare both the usual contracts with the PPP models or the other kinds of systems. I will give two examples. In the case of Belo Horizonte, we started with a facilities project, and the contract had some performance-based issues, so we could compare the cost from both sides. And after the teachers and all the stakeholders would be convinced that this is a good model, we started to insert in the project some pedagogical issues, some pedagogical things that could improve the quality of the schools. So the contract could support this kind of introduction of pedagogical issues after that, after a while, in this case of the project. So we started as a facility program, and after that we could start to insert some pedagogical issues. Another example, it's not a PPP, but it's a partnership. In Minas Gerais, we started a project in 2022. The project is it's called Somar. It's just in Portuguese. In English it's said to add, and involves the management of state high schools in partnership with non-profit organizations. We call the charter schools. So we did a public call for proposal in this case. And in these schools, we have in Minas Gerais 3,400 schools around the cities. In Minas Gerais, we have 800 cities. So it's a lot of cities and a lot of schools. And we started this project with 3 schools only to compare these two systems, a system with an NGO running the school and the usual system. And we compare with this kind of, in the contract, with performance-based. So we compared each index with the schools that were in the summer project and the other ones. And we started to discuss with the teachers in both schools, what could we do to improve? And we introduced with in this case, was with the Centro de Educação da Bahia, CETEB, that was the NGO that introduced and shared some management models, some community involvement, so we could improve the quality of the schools, what they needed to do to improve the quality, and we could compare what kind of model was better running in these two cases. So it was two examples just to share with you. In this case, one is not a PPP, and the other one is PPP. I think we can think this just like as a contract management. So if you think it's a contract, and I can improve the kind of contract that we have, I think we should solve this kind of problem.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Alexandra, if you just like 30 seconds on this, because I have one more thing I wanted to talk, and we're getting close to our time.
I don't have anything to add. You can.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the incorporation of digitization, digital technologies into schools, which of course is now really quite crucial. And, you know, kind of bringing it in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 4, to have inclusive and equitable access to education for all. Actually, the role of digital solutions is quite fundamental in this, because if you're not providing that education component, then you're really shortchanging the students, and those that can then get that education in private schools are way ahead of the ones in the public sector that are not able to get that. To what extent are we able to do that? And what I'd like you is individually, just 1 minute each, share your experiences with incorporating technology into the school infrastructure, or even having a technology solution as a standalone project that kind of integrates technologies into existing schools. If I may start with Sumaya on this, please.
Thank you, Nasser. Yes, Nasser. Incorporating technology in schools is a vital step toward modernizing education and ensuring students have access to the tools they need to succeed in a digital world. Some aspects that using in Jordan in public schools, we are using solar photovoltaic panels in some schools, installing Wi-Fi networks, some smart boards for the first 3 grades, and digital projectors. Ministry of Education also interesting in to use energy saving systems in the PPP schools, smart boards, also looking to use a new construction technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Salman?
In our school, we have initiated a digital learning program, and we have provided some smart screens, and the computer labs are already there. And we have introduced some online lectures, and to ensure and to further assist. And apart from that, just to improve the governance of the schools, we have introduced biometric system and face recognitions. And for the data collection, we have introduced EMIS, and we have developed centrally education management information systems. So and in some schools in here in Pakistan, the tablet system and through the gamification, these techniques are also being used, so there to further enhance the learning of students. So the different sort of technology solutions are being provided in different schools, and they have been very effective to some extent.
Cool. Okay. Thiago, please.
We have participated in some projects introducing technology in school. One of the key problems that we have is the connection with the internet in most of the schools, mainly on the rural areas. Nowadays, we are doing a small project with Maranhão, the state of Maranhão, and we're discussing with them how can we do this. We included in the project two things. The first was the internet from I forgot the name. The Elon Musk company with the satellites for the internet. It's not SpaceX, it's the other one. So we could get internet in the rural area. So it's easier nowadays that we take internet for there. And the second thing that was one big problem is training the teachers. Most of the problem of insert technology in the schools, it's not the students that could learn with this, because for the students it's much easier than for the teachers. We have to include the teachers in this kind of training, and we did a previous training with them, and we started to introduce other kinds of learning systems with them, and we try to construct a way for them to learn easier, and how they would pass this intelligence for the kids, and how they could insert this in their usual classes. So we try to discuss these 2 points with them, and to start the project. This was what was better when we did it.
Thank you. Last but not least, Alexandre, if you'd like to add your experience on that.
So Nasser, I don't have an experience in operating existing schools. In Recife's project, PPP project, we have kindergartens being built. So we didn't had this trouble with the renovation of technology, because children of this age doesn't use those gadgets that normally schools use, like laptops and tablets, etc. We have, of course, the connectivity and some printers, something for the teachers, but it's not it's not a point. When I when I visit Belo Horizonte, to know the experience that Thiago was talking about, the city hall, the municipality, and also the private partner told us that was a problem, because that was an issue, because we had to change the contract. I don't know if Thiago, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they had to change the contract to incorporate new technologies a long time. But if I was developing a PPP project in education in Brazil that involves that, I don't know if I would bring to the contract this alteration in technology, and that's and why is that? Sometimes the reality in low and middle income countries, that sometimes even using PPPs, we cannot contract by results. It's a risk. The risk and the possibility of changing technology along the contract is specified, and that can be done. But do we have money to pay for that? I think this is an analysis that has to be made case by case. It's a problem. We had we here in Recife are also developing a PPP in solid waste, and unfortunately we can't incorporate this technology, those evolving technology in the contract, because we don't have money to pay. that's the issue in Brazil.
I think in the context of education, can you afford not to provide it to the children, which is probably outside of the remit of what we're discussing here.
Okay. You can of course change the contract a long time. That's
that's
the thing.
I think that is the issue when you have a long-term contract and you're locked into something like that. So, and trying to imagine technology in the future over 25 years is really complex. So, fully understood. Okay. We've got some interesting observations and questions. First of all, thank you very much for the audience to be with us. I've seen, people from quite a range of countries, so grateful that you're all here. I'm glad to see that Arun Kumar has joined us from Africa, and hopefully we'll be involving you some more in more of these. There's a couple of questions I picked up. One of them, and this is from Zain, how do you see the full name? Zain Fauzi. Can the speakers share insights on how they manage the monitoring of these type of projects to ensure the outcomes? One of you put your hand up, whoever feels they're happy to answer this question. Otherwise, I have to pick. Salman, go ahead, please.
So in our projects, we have a mechanism of a concept of independent experts and auditors. So basically, just to keep this monitoring independent, so we hire independent experts and auditors who technically and financially review their performances in line with the contract and the KPIs which are already designed. So they independently review the performance, and then based on that, we have an escrow mechanism through which the payments is released directly, just to ensure the uninterrupted payment flow. So, and apart from these IEs and IEs, we have the PPP nodes. They have a role of monitoring evaluation as well, and the other departmental monitoring and directorates and the monitoring wings. They can also intervene in the. They can also monitor the project, but the regular monitoring is through the IEs and IEs.
Yeah, so using the performance indicators, the KPIs, availability indicators, and so on to actually monitor how that's going. That of course is, if I may, that is easy to say and sometimes quite difficult to achieve. I mean, we see this in monitoring PPP projects that sometimes the capacity to monitor is not quite there, and there's aspects to the monitoring. One is the contract administration, and the other is the quality checking, and sometimes the gap between them can be quite wide. If anyone else would like to offer a different perspective, otherwise we can move to another question.
Nasser, I think it's interesting when we're talking about monitoring the role of the independent verifier. So I think in all the contracts we must have this kind of role, because it's easier. So someone that is not related to any of the parts of the contract, and they can check all the indexing and all the points in the contract, so we can improve some with independence. So I think this would be a nice and interesting part in the contracts that we could have to help monitoring the contracts.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think that the independent verifier doesn't solve everything. We have issues here in Brazil by monitoring the contract as a whole. The KPIs are one specific point of the contract, and if the public gestures are not management are not able to manage all the it's a thing to tackle.
Yeah, and there's a range of views on whether something like this should be left to somebody independent or should be with the government, particularly, by the way, in the regulated sectors. I think when you're talking about roads and so on, when it's more technical, it's fine. But when it comes, for example, when we deal with health, when we deal with education, when we deal with elderly care, the respective ministry or government department has a duty of care to its patients or to its students, and cannot say, well, an independent monitor said this, and therefore I have to stand still. So we do find these tensions coming up in what we call the regulated sectors, which social sector services tend to be in. So thank you for that question, Zain Fawzi from Asian Development Bank. Iyad Amesh, thank you for your contributions and your comments. There was a question on your comment from Eduardo. How do you see the name without? Okay, Gassenfirth, which is about activities that can be done outside of school working hours. This is actually something that comes up a lot in school PPPs, where in order to generate some additional income that can offset the payments being made by the ministry, they'll say, well, how about you use the facilities outside of hours? And certainly if you have a school with a playground, with a gym, with a swimming pool, with amenities like classrooms that can be used for further education, extracurricular courses for adults, not just for children, then obviously that's a piece of infrastructure that can be utilized by the private sector. I know that PPP projects that have gone to tender with this type of provision in have had very mixed reactions. You know, some would say, no, I don't want the risk of somebody coming in and coming in and actually ruining my playground, and then I'm going to have availability payments deducted or KPIs deducted because of somebody for the marginal extra revenue. I'm not interested in taking the risk. Some welcome it wholeheartedly. You've been through a tendering process recently, Sumaya. What was the perspective on that one in terms of the additional service that can be sold to the public?
Yes, I think it's a difference from country to country and depends on the regulations of the Ministry of Education. Some of services that could be able to apply in Brazil, for example, couldn't be able to apply in Jordan. So it's a depend on the strategy of the ministry, on the obligation regulations of every single ministry.
Yeah, very valid point. I think one more perspective, and I think I need to give the floor back to Ziad Alexander Hayek. So
sorry,
Alexander, yes.
My internet went out. I didn't get the question.
Yeah,
sorry.
it was about so additional services that where you can basically use the facilities and so on for the public, typically on a paid basis, and that would then give a revenue stream that offsets the fiscal obligation.
To use the infrastructure of the schools to another service
like
that
the
not
playground, the swimming pool, the classrooms, to rent those out to the private sector.
If I think that is it's a good
you've had any experiences in executing that.
I don't know any experiences. Okay.
In all cases, I really want to thank you. It's been very dynamic and insightful, and I'll pass back to Ziad to close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nasser, and thank you to all the panelists and everybody. I will use a little bit of the 3 minutes left to ask a question that, if I may, I had posed it to Thiago in the chat, but I'm interested if anybody else, has any experience in comparing academic results of charter schools versus public versus PPP schools that are only about construction and maintenance. Has anybody any experience in that?
I personally haven't. I don't know if charter schools were used in any of the countries that we're talking about.
They were used in Belo Horizonte, but they probably haven't compared them academically.
I posted an answers in the chat.
Sorry, I didn't.
No problem. In the charter school, in comparing the PPPs, we didn't introduce the pedagogical issues. We started to introduce now, but it's not in the same way. So I can't compare the quality of the schools thinking about the pedagogical. But in the case of the charter school, we could compare any school that was fully operated by the NGO comparing to the regular school. and they had independence to bring new solutions. And because of that, we could compare the pedagogical issues between the two schools. For sure, it was just a test that we did here. It was just 3 schools. Now we are open for 100 schools here in Minas Gerais.
What were the results? What were the academic results of the NGOs?
Results, they were better than the regular one because of the independence to bring new solutions.
Okay,
and because it was they were bigger. They could bring new things to the students, and it was a very interesting comparison with the other teachers, and they understood why we were open the window for this kind of solution.
Understood. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Our next session is supposed to be in 2 weeks on social housing, but we don't know if we are going to be able to bring it to you or not. We are going to do our best. So please stay tuned on LinkedIn to get updates for whether it's going to be on social housing or whether it's going to be on another topic. Thank you again, and see you in 2 weeks' time.